Hello, everyone. This is Maggie Ewell, and I am pleased to be here with you today to give you this Zoom webinar on an overview of revisions to 7 CFR 3419. I am just trying to make sure everyone can hear and see me. Just gonna go with it. If for some reason you can't hear or see me, please enter a note in the chat. But I am pleased to be able to talk about everything today, and hold on one second. The rule was published on May 11th, 2018, and it made revisions to an existing rule. So one note for right now is that if you are to Google online 7 CFR 3419, you will still find the old rule listed in the eCFR, the Electronic Federal Register. You would need to look for the one published in the Federal Register that details all of our changes. They will be updating. They do update on a regular basis, the eCFR, so hopefully that will be updated for a combined rule soon. So we also have set up a website, a resource page on our website. I have it listed at the end, where we have a link to the final rule. We have an FAQ as well. So that's a good place for resources and to share with people who may not be able to be on the webinar today. So I'm going to break our time together today into 4 blocks. I'm going to give you a little bit of a summary of the rule and its background. We're going to walk through the key changes, and then we're going to have plenty of time for your questions and our answers. And I'm joined here today by Cynthia Montgomery, our Deputy Director, and Maribel Angus-Miller, our Chief of the Policy Division. So the summary that I'm going over is contained in what they call the preamble to the final rule we published. The preamble kind of lays out the overall summary and background for why we made all of these changes. So it's a good place to start to understand some of the explanations and perspective of NIFA into some of the requirements that are laid out in the rule. The first thing we did was to make updates for the last 3 farm bills. This rule had not been updated in over a decade, so we were a little bit behind on some of the requirements. The second area was making changes, and those primarily were to the definitions, to the section that identified allowable uses of matching funds, and we really focused on clarifying what are allowable uses of match. So just for some more background, in 2017, November 13th, we published a notice of proposed rulemaking in the Federal Register. This is part of the formal regulatory process where we seek input on changes that we're thinking of making. That rule was open for 60 days, and we only received 1 comment, and it was actually not about our specific rule. It was kind of about just someone who was commenting in general about government rules. So we had no relevant comments to make changes to what we had proposed in November. Because of that, and because of the regulatory process, the final rule really sticks very closely to what was in the notice of proposed rulemaking, the primary change being we went from proposing things to making them final. So let's talk about the first area. The definitions. For eligible institution, we added Central State University and West Virginia State University. Those had been added in recent years and were not reflected in the rule. The second major change we made was to substitute the word capacity for formula throughout the rule. In 2014, NIFA rebranded the formula awards as capacity grants, so this change was consistent with NIFA's current practices. The third change to the definitions was to remove the term qualifying education activities. This was a term that was originally created and added in the rule about 20 years ago. It's not in the statute and does not exist anywhere outside the rule. And what we attempted to do through the preamble and through the allowable uses of match is to embed kind of the activities that are allowable within those areas rather than creating a separate term. Why did we do this? There was a lot of confusion about what constituted allowable qualifying education activities. Some of that confusion was due to old Q&As from NIFA, and some of that was due to the fact that there was a published final rule, there was a published notice of proposed rulemaking that never became final, but had some changes and clarifications. So people weren't sure what to follow, what was the rule, and when we started talking about what qualified as the activities and defining it, it really came back to let's follow what's authorized in NAREPTA and what is codified for the extension and research programs rather than creating a new term that's a modification of those. So this rule goes back and uses the language from the extension and Evans-Allen research authorizations. So what are those? For research under Evans-Allen, funds are for conducting actual research, for printing, disseminating the results of the research, planning, direction, purchase and rental of land, and the construction, acquisition, alteration, or repair of buildings necessary for conducting agricultural research. Those are the four broad areas. For extension, it's much broader. It's the expenses of conducting extension program and activities. When you look a little further, you'll see that 3221E prohibits extension funds being spent on college course teaching and lectures. And then further, extension education is defined as informal, whereas teaching and education is defined as formal classroom instruction. So extension is really those activities that are not formal classroom instruction. And if you have questions, please feel free to put those in the chat as we go along. I'm going to get through my slides. I've got about probably 15 more minutes, and then we'll take questions. So the matching funds requirements section removed a lot of outdated information. There was language in there about things due in 1999. So we stripped that out and we went in and added the matching requirements for 1862s and insular areas, which is a 50% requirement, and we replaced the existing text with the matching requirement for Section 1444 and 1445 programs, which is 100% of federal funds. In the Waiver Authority section, we removed the outdated section and we modified the existing provisions to add the authorization of up to 50% for 1890s and 100% for insular areas. We also went ahead and clarified what criteria you have to meet to be eligible for a waiver. Basically, it's 4 areas. The first would be an impact from some type of natural disaster, whether it be a flood, fire, tornado, hurricane, or drought. It could be a state financial crisis, meaning the state can't provide financial funds. It could be an institution financial crisis, or it could be that you still lack match after demonstrating good faith efforts to obtain funds. We also wanted to outline the process for submitting waiver requests. In the rule, it does not include emails and things that might change, but rather lays out the big picture fundamentals of the process, and that includes who submits, when, and the supporting documentation. In the rule, it states the president of the institution submits this request in writing. This decision was made due to the nature of the criteria for waivers. Really, it has to be a very high level because you're saying that either the institution's in crisis or you've done everything you can to obtain match, and that really rises to a level above the authorized representative. We really want to make sure that the president of the institution is aware of any request for a matching waiver. The request must include the name of your institution, which type of capacity funds you're requesting the waiver for, the fiscal year, and the basis of the request. And the basis means one of those four on the previous slide. For timing, you can submit your waiver request with your application or at any time during the period of performance. We know many of you wait until the year is underway to see how things are going, and also because oftentimes your states are on a different year. They might be on a July to June year instead of October through September. So you need time to see what the match is going to look like, and that's fine. One key change we made with supporting documentation was to add the word current. In practice, what we had seen is people resubmitting the same packet over and over, and so we made an update to be sure that when you're submitting your waiver, that the documentation supporting the request for one of those four areas shows that it's within the past 2 years. Another clarification we had made is that we're really looking for primary support, such as budgets.
Hey, there's a green lizard.
Can you please mute your phone? Can you please mute your phone? Thank you. Budgets and other primary source instead of news articles. News articles are supplemental. So when we get to the next section, that's 7 CFR 3419.5, the only change we made to this section was replacing the word formula with capacity, and that has to do with the certification of matching funds. In 3419.6, we updated the terminology. Again, so that we were replacing the word formula with capacity. We also added clarifying language around the allowable uses of matching funds, and that is that they have to be for the same purpose as federal dollars, agricultural research and extension activities that have been approved in the plan of work. And so that brings the language in line with all of the practices OGFM and NIFA had put in place over the past few years. The last update that was made to this section was to prohibit the use of tuition or student fees as match. The preamble explains how tuition is already prohibited in 7 U.S. Code 3221 and 3222. And the student fees do not provide any benefit to our grant, so they are also not allowable. So when we're talking about the same purpose, this was another part of the reason why we eliminated the term qualifying education activities, because in some previous Q's and A's and some previous interpretations, that term could be used for activities that were prohibited under the award, for example, formal classroom instruction. So we really wanted to go back in this rule and make sure it was very clear that match met the federal-wide definition for match, which is that it is used for the same purpose and accomplishes the program objectives. So I always like to just boil it down to the most simplest form, which is to be allowable as match, the cost must be allowable under the federal award. So if you could have charged it to the grant, you can charge it as match. So then we went ahead and added a section on reporting, just to clarify that match must be reported on the annual 425, standard form 425, federal financial report. And then finally, in subsection 8, we made small modifications to the section on redistribution of funds. We removed a date because the timing of reimbursements does vary, and so we removed July 1st. Our changes do not change the statutory requirement for reimbursement, so it was only removing the date. So reapportionment would still occur, it just may not happen by July 1st. Finally, rulemaking is supposed to be in plain English now, and so I removed instances of shall and changed it to must. And I'm going to quickly show you, this is the website page we set up a few weeks ago. It has the link to the rule, as well as a link to Q's and A's. And so with that, I was going to pull up the chat window, and if you have questions, please feel free to enter them in the chat. I do have everyone on mute just because there's so many people. It was a lot of background noise when we first got started. Anyone have any questions? We do have one question. Will the PowerPoint be posted online? It will not be posted online at this time. NIFA is undergoing an effort to make sure all of the materials on our website are 508 compliant, and we're still working on getting all of our PowerPoints 508 compliant. I'm hoping that will happen in the near future, and as soon as it is, we will post them online, but it won't be posted immediately after this. We are recording the presentation so that, again, once we have solved that dilemma, we will be able to get it online. Email to you. Yes, so if you would like a copy of it, I can certainly email that to you. Let me give you my email address. It's on the slide. I can also work with Dr. Essel and Dr. Thompson to get the PowerPoint out to folks if that's easier. Does anyone else have any questions? Can you speak to the formal classroom instruction piece? So formal classroom instruction is basically teaching undergraduate and in some instances graduate student courses at the university. So someone who is, you could not count as match the portion of the salary that's spent on formal classroom instruction. All right, if you need more than that, please follow back up. Another question, can you clarify your comment that if it can be charged to the grant, it can be used as match? Certainly. So basically, when you think of federal grants, there's a federal share and a non-federal share. And so your non-federal share is the 100% match, or up to 50% if you have it waived, if you have a waiver. So basically, what that means is that all of those funds that are spent need to be spent in support of the project and allowable activities. So if you are charging something as match, you would need to make sure that you could have charged it to the grant, following all of the information and requirements in the uniform guidance, making sure you're meeting all the terms and conditions of your grant, because all of those rules apply to the match. So if you were trying to charge something as match that was prohibited under your federal award, for example, indirect costs, you could not count that as match because it's not allowable under the grant. So basically, if whatever you were going to charge as match, you could have instead charged to the federal award, you're fine. If you could not have charged it to the award because it's prohibited, you can't charge it as match. Is there a plan to form university presidents about the changes? We issued a memo about 1.5 years ago that I believe was labeled to university presidents. We have undergone a formal rulemaking, and so that information was in the Federal Register. We blasted it out to everyone on our listservs, so we don't typically send notifications to anyone else when there's a rulemaking, because it's a formal action that we went through the proposed rule, the final rule. It's in the Federal Register. When will FY18 waiver request be approved or denied? I don't know that timeline. I apologize. Brenda Barnett would be the person to let you know, so feel free to follow up with her. I was always told that capacity funds could not be used for brick and mortar projects. It says they can be used construction. So on the research side, there's more flexibility on funds for renovations, alterations, and constructions. So that would be a situation where you would have to receive prior approval. And so you would need to talk to Brenda Barnett as well as the national program leader about the proposed project for the research funds. It cannot be used on the extension side for any brick and mortar. Got lots of time for more questions. Well, while people are typing, I just thought maybe I could give you a quick preview of the FAQs that we have on our website. Oh, I'm happy I was able to clarify your question. All right, let's see if I can pull up the FAQs. Oh, I just closed it, sorry. I think I had it there and now it disappeared. All right, so here is the page with the final rule. And if you will see, we have the FAQs are down here, as well as the link to the final rule. So if we open it up, you can see we have about 9 questions. All right, does anyone else have any questions? All right, well, I will stay around for maybe about 7 or 8 more minutes until 2 o'clock. And in the meantime, if you have everything you need, go ahead and log off. But otherwise, I'll stay around for a few more minutes if there's any questions. When will the final FY18 capacity notice of awards be coming out? I am not sure about that, to be honest. Right, I'm trying to pull up slide 18 again. Is this the slide you had a question on? Slide 18? Okay. Does anyone else have any other questions? Oh, how to request updates. Request updates. How to request a waiver? Okay, great. I'm glad I got the right one. Also, in terms of where to submit your requests, you can submit it to formula grant questions at nifa.usda.gov, or you could submit it to your grant specialist directly or to Brenda. Are there any other questions? Someone had a question about student fees do not provide benefit to your grants. Student fees are typically charged in conjunction with tuition to students who are attending, and in some awards where that is paid for by the university, they attempt to count that as match. And so the clarification is that tuition is specifically prohibited in the statute or in the U.S. Code. However, student fees was not explicitly mentioned, but when you look at, student fees cover everything from the library to activities to, I don't know, it probably even goes toward like snowkeeping, who knows. So those fees are not, do not benefit the award. So therefore you could not count any payment of student fees as match. How is student housing treated? Again, if you look at the purpose of the awards, really anything that supports students directly is not in line with what the capacity extension and research are doing. So I can't really see how that would be allowable. You certainly wouldn't charge student housing to your award. So therefore you could not count it as match. So as I mentioned with the waiver request, why does it come from the president versus the research director or AOR? If you look at the 4 criteria, you are saying that that either there was the natural disaster, or that the state has a financial crisis, the institution has a financial crisis, or you've tried everything to get match and haven't. And so in order for that, when we went through and decided, okay, what level would we want that request to come from? The president needs to be involved if you're saying, I can't meet my federally mandated match, I've tried everything possible, versus just the research director, the AOR, maybe they haven't elevated it to the president. We would have no way of knowing if the match request was just signed by them. And so internally the decision was to have that be signed by the president. And again, we did publish it for 60 days for comment. We received no comments indicating concern with that area. So we just moved ahead with it as proposed. So what is considered supporting documents besides budgets? It can be communications from the state legislature if you've requested funds and have formal communication back from them indicating they're not going to provide them. If you have a formal declaration of a disaster in your state, it can be all of the documented attempts you've made to obtain match at the state or institution level. It's just those primary resources. What we had seen in previous years was a lot of newspaper articles about the environment in the state versus those primary source documents. Okay, so we have, can a match request be considered after the annual SF25 is done? Not sure. A matching waiver request. I do believe if you hit the point where you're submitting your final 425 and you are short on match, there is a possibility of requesting a post waiver. Those are in exceptional circumstances. We really are looking for you to be monitoring the situation closely and addressing it prior to the final 425. But if you do get into that situation and something outside of your control popped up, then we will consider it, yes. Sorry, there's 2 cameras. I never know which one to look at. I think I'm supposed to look at this one. Are there any other questions? Can you repeat what you just said? So the question had been, can a match request be considered after the annual 425 is done? And so the answer is, if you have gone the year and you have done your annual 425, and at that point you realize that you haven't fully met your match, can you then request a post waiver? And the answer is yes, in certain situations we will consider that. We would like you to be proactive in monitoring the situation and addressing it before you get to that point, but if circumstances are beyond your control, then we will consider it. We do have one question about, we submitted a waiver request, will we need to resubmit? You should not. The rule just codified the practices we already have in place. There was no changes to the process for matching waivers in the rule. There was a question regarding use of 1890 capacity funds for student fees applied to other fees. I'm not sure what Manners and other ag school or other university related fees are. You need to go back to thinking that, would you charge those fees to your extension or research awards? And if you would not, then you cannot charge them as match. I think more people are typing. I'm going to put up on the screen the website again in case anyone wanted to look at that. Are there any other questions? I also want to put up my contact information. Again, feel free to email or call me if you have questions. I think I will work with Dr. Essel and Dr. Thompson about getting the PowerPoint out to folks, but you're free to email me as well if you would like a copy. All right, I'll give it about 60 more seconds if you have any more questions. Was there anything? Cynthia just waved. She says hello. All right. Well, I will give everyone an extra hour back in their day, which I'm pretty sure everyone will be happy about. So again, if you have any questions as you look at this rule, as if you have internal discussions, please feel free to contact me directly. We'll also be having our next quarterly 1890 call toward the end of June, and I'll have this on the agenda in case as you look at it, you have any follow-up questions. So thank you very much for joining us today. We really appreciate your participation, and I look forward to talking with you all soon.